gonna trouble.
Welcome to another edition of Peaceworker Radio, coming to you from WCCR, Voice and Vision of Cambridge at 438 Mass Avenue in Cambridge. I spoke today to legal authorities about free speech, and there's a reason for it. I believe that the Democratic National Convention is being run like a private entity. I believe that the Democratic debate, which took place on last Saturday, took place in a way that discriminated against Bernie Sanders. Of course, the question would be, if one has a political opinion, then one would always feel that one's candidate was discriminated against. But this was particularly a problem, and we'll be getting to this particular kind of discrimination by the Democratic National Convention. There's some disturbing information about the position of leadership in this Democratic body, this Democratic Party leadership body. We'll be speaking also, of course, about the candidate, Bernie Sanders, and about the debate itself. But the first part of our program today is going to be about Black Lives Matter. We've mentioned that before. We're interested in being a force to point the finger at cases in which blacks are being discriminated against, are being brutalized, are being murdered by police in the United States. We feel that it's particularly the case of murder, of police intentionally killing blacks when the use of force can be implemented without killing, without the intent to kill, without the intent to end someone's life. The ending of someone's life is a question that belongs to a judge and jury, and not to an individual officer, not to the police. The police cannot or should not be allowed to kill someone suspected of a crime. That is, however, through the Supreme Court. Again, it's the Supreme Court who made the ruling and made it so subjective that police can use force to kill. It's a question then of the intent, whether or not the officer admits to the intent of killing, of wanting to kill. But then again, what police officer would, who had been brought to trial on a suspected intent to kill, would actually admit that that was his intention. And this is the problem. Police do not have to admit to these kinds of malfeasance, but the instances of police brutality increasing in number in the United States, and we will be showing a content like this, and we would like to say in advance that the graphic nature of this clip is disturbing, and parents should be warned not to let their offspring then perhaps view this if their opinion is that killing would take place, and that such a graphic nature. But then again, this happens on TV all the time, or on video games. This, however, is an actual recording of a police killing, this one in Los Angeles. So without further ado, we will continue with this video.
Is it a gun? It's a gun, it's a gun. You fucking move, I'm gonna kill you, bitch.
The person then who is struggling against these two police officers, apparently the individual who is now fighting for their lives, was stopped by police on a bicycle because he was riding apparently a bicycle listening on headphones to music, and the police stopped him and told him that he wasn't allowed to do that, apparently. And then he was cleared, he got back on his bike and continued to riding, and the police saw him put back on the headphones apparently and stopped him again. And then this incident that is recorded obviously or apparently from someone in the second story window looking down at these two police officers wrestling with this individual and then eventually killing him.
Sit down. Sit down. That's his fucking gun.
¡Ey! No, él no te hizo nada, nosotros estábamos viendo. Ahí tú le pegaste por detrás. Sí, él sí te duele, ¿verdad? Porque es policía. Él sí te duele. ¡Ey! Ya suéltalo, la verga. Suéltalo, ya ves que pinche marica, pinche marica.
In the back of the location.
Ya, él no dejan ahí.
So what you've seen in that video is the killing of an individual by two Los Angeles police officers. We're going to show the video again, and we're going to stop it at various points to make certain that the information that is imparted in this video is actually seen by you as the viewers at home. It starts off with Officer Gunman 1 and Officer Gunman 2 and the individual.
See the gun? It's gun, it's gun. You fucking move, I'm gonna kill you, bitch.
So what takes place now is one of the officers pulls out his firearm and is about to commence with the murder. So what takes place there is the officer 2 shoots, tries to shoot apparently Mr. Aguilar, but shoots his the officer 1 with that discharge of that weapon. That's in the officer 2 then puts the gun down.
What's up, baby? What's the gun? Yeah, I'm heavy. I got shot. I didn't shoot nobody. You? I got on the window. Huh? I didn't shoot nobody. I got shot in the stomach. I didn't shoot nobody. Come on.
So then it becomes apparent then that the officer 1 says that he's been shot, and Mr. Aguilar says, "I didn't shoot anyone. I didn't shoot." So then the question of who was it that did the shooting?
Stop fucking fool, man. Why you gonna put a gun on me?
Aguilar says, "Come on, man, or why are you pulling a gun on me?" So Aguilar is aware of that, whereby Officer 1 has already been shot. So Officer 2 has already been shot. So Officer 1 is pulling his rifle, his weapon again.
Say I'm gonna do it.
You hear then shot 2. The second shot was, the first shot went into Officer 2, and the second shot went to Aguilar, and then there are further shots that take place. Officer 1 pulls his firearm and shoots. Officer 2 pulls his firearm and shoots 3 shots into Aguilar at point blank range.
Bullshit. Hey, what's the address?
I got shot.
What's the address? What's the address, man?
So what's actually happening here is a live video of a police murder. I don't know how many of these there are, but I have heard there are several of them on YouTube. For those of you at home who may not watch YouTube or may not have ever seen anything like this, it is, as you're aware, very disturbing, and it's disturbing for a number of reasons. It's disturbing for what actually follows now. the police have been called apparently. Backup is on its way. And what happens here is a question as well.
Fucking shot! Fucking back! I can't do it. You got a fucking gun? Hey! Shot him in the fucking back. Just what's the address here?
The question to be asked is, what is the officer doing lying on top of the suspect now? What is actually happening here? Why is Officer 2 and Officer 1 struggling again? This man has been shot. Mr. Aguilar has been shot now 5 times, 4 times. Officer 2 has been shot 1 time, apparently not life-threatening because he's, you know, still working on Aguilar, but Officer 1 is lying on top of Aguilar. What is he actually doing? What is the reason? What is part of the police procedure for this type of behavior?
6974.
What is it? I'm dying.
Aguilar says here, I'm dying. Aguilar says the person that Officer 1 is lying on top of and apparently doing something with Aguilar's head from the angle there. And Officer 2 looks like he's reaching for his gun again.
What's the address here, please?
Someone, apparently Officer 2 is asking the person making the video, what's the address here?
6974.
And the person making the video is, of course, giving helpful information to the police.
That's all the address.
6974.
Address, please.
27.
What is your fucking GPS? Wow, we've been shot. That's all I fucking He's got another gun or what?
69th Street, man. Come on.
And a lot of information is changing hands apparently to what street and what's the exact house number so that the ambulance or so that the police backup can get there quickly.
Homie, come on, my boy. Come on, don't go out like that, my nigga. Come on.
998, what's the address?
69th Street in Artesia.
So now it's become clear what the address is, and then they're giving the address to someone. Police Officer 1 could apparently, seeing as how handcuffs have already been put on Aguilar, and he's been shot 4 times. So one would imagine that it's not necessary to lie down on top of him and work at his head somehow. I can't be certain what that is from this angle.
59th Street. 59th Street.
So there are apparently witnesses or bystanders to the left that we cannot see that are perhaps calling the backup or something of that nature.
Wait.
Fucking no bullshit. Fucking shot him in the fucking back.
69th way. We're in the
Come on, get out there. Let him breathe,
Shot him
man.
in the
You
fucking
shot him.
back.
Let him breathe, man.
Right, he's got a gun.
Come on, my
Shot
boy.
him.
Shot him in the back. The gate going out. See?
Need a gun.
Come on, homie.
Shot him in the back.
Okay.
Ya suéltalo, suéltalo. No te va a hacer nada, ya está muerto.
Right here. Does he have another one?
Does he
Have another one.
No, no. Ya que lo mataste, ya lo deja. No te va a hacer nada.
Sit down.
So now Officer 1 is giving instructions to Officer 2 to move the scene, to move somewhere. I believe sirens start here. Blood is now everywhere on Officer 1, on Officer 2. And I believe there was a question of, does he have another weapon? Does he have another gun?
Sit down.
That's all it feels.
Sit down. That's his fucking gun.
¡Ey! No, él no te hizo nada, nosotros estábamos viendo. Ahí tú le pegaste por detrás. Sí, él se calmó, le va a coger policía. Él sí te duele. ¡Ey! ¡Ya suéltalo, la verga! ¡Suéltalo, ya vete, pinche marica, pinche marica!
So now the police backup has arrived here. The two officers can be seen, one of them apparently with a shotgun or something, some type of weapon that he's raising, ready to fire. These are the voices apparently of the person making the video inside an apartment perhaps. Now Officer 2 is being brought back by colleagues. He's been saved now. Whatever story is being given that he'd been shot perhaps by Aguilar or some other incidents, then the police are rushing him back. Perhaps to safety, perhaps to an ambulance. Then something was apparently left to be picked up. Officer 1 then gives instructions to one of the backup to go out and pick up whatever it was that had been left out there. The backup is giving instructions. It's unclear basically what he's doing. He may be, in any case, he seems to be giving instructions to bystanders perhaps that can't be seen farther to the left of the screen. Someone has come, apparently bystander has come to be of assistance somehow apparently to Officer 2, to the backup officer. It apparently, the person coming was apparently another officer from another part of the backup. He has a handgun. Apparently another language is being spoken. I'm not exactly certain what that is. I can't understand the text. Additional backup is now apparent. We're looking at real time here. The amount of time which has transpired basically is only about 3.5 minutes. Although various officers are there, no one has actually waited to help the individual lying, Mr. Aguilar, who's been shot 4 times. The Officer 1 who's still putting pressure on Aguilar is getting apparently some good support from his colleagues. There are now 5 police officers, one just arriving, hasn't entered that area, one in a black uniform, and 3 others gathered around. There's now 6 police officers there. Aguilar's motionless on the floor there behind that automobile.
He's dead.
Now apparently one officer after another steps over the body of Aguilar. Officers are now pointing up, either upwards to a flight of stairs or something which may be visible to them. Then an officer then goes to that, is following what's been pointed to, and apparently it's a stairway, obviously. So someone is at the stairway, and the officer then is mounting the stair. Perhaps a witness, perhaps someone that had seen, but the officers are perhaps unaware of the person making the video. Further officers mount the stairway. That is then a picture of the stairway. One cannot see from this angle what precisely that is. Officers coming down. There's an officer then apparently close to Aguilar. The camera is pulling back. It's now apparent to see that there are a number of officers there. One in black uniform is leaving the scene. It's still unclear whether or not an ambulance has been called. Aguilar is motionless. Apparently, my idea that an officer was trying to help Aguilar is apparently not the case. That is a truly disturbing video on YouTube. There's a lot to be said about this video content. The examination of the precise content will undoubtedly be taken into consideration by the superintendent of the police force and perhaps a grand jury, which should be called to examine this evidence. Apparently this murder took place over a year ago, and this video just surfaced recently, became part of the file or the case. There are a number of things to be said, of course, in reference to the courage of an individual actually taking this video. It's very courageous to do something like this, because police who are capable of murdering an individual, of shooting a colleague and then not telling the colleague that, oh, I'm sorry, I shot you, immediately is the idea that Aguilar was the one who had issued the shots. And the question would be then of each police officer, we thought he had a gun, and he had a gun. And that's basically what the Supreme Court has mentioned, that the police can use deadly force, which they just did. Apparently Aguilar was killed by those 5 shots. 4 of them into his body, 1 of them into Officer 2. And the question will be, what happens now? Will a trial take place in reference to these officers? Have they already been exonerated? If they've already been exonerated, if there had been some type of court case held and they have already been exonerated, then they can't be tried twice for the same crime. In other words, they would have gotten away with legally with the murder having taken place. The fact that this evidence was entered too late. In any case, this is something that would need to be examined. What's apparent in reference to the question of Black Lives Matter, and this is some backup perhaps that Black Lives Matter activists should know. Anyone associated with this case, anyone associated with Mr. Aguilar, anyone who's a relative of his or a friend of his can file a case in court for damages. Anyone. Emotional damages, legal questions will be solved whether or not payments are made, but the advice that you can get from almost any attorney is to file a suit. File a suit in court in reference to a criminal action and take the police officers, the state of California, the city of Los Angeles, to court on this and see if it's not possible to examine and pump the city of California, the city of Los Angeles and the state of California dry financially, so that the impetus will then be placed on the state of California to clean up a situation in which the Los Angeles police actually feel that they can commit murder against an innocent bystander. Apparently, Mr. Aguilar was just riding a bike and wound up paying for it with his life. There have been a number of statements on YouTube in reference to this, some of them shocking in themselves, meaning that don't mess with the police. If the police tell you to do something, then do it. How ridiculous is that? It's giving in to a police force in which the police are completely wrong. The police have no jurisdiction to kill an individual. The Supreme Court has mentioned that the police have the right to kill an individual if they feel that they're in danger. And of course, it could be stated that both of these police officers felt that they were in danger and for that reason had to kill Aguilar. But the reality of this film shows that they were not in danger. They were completely in control, but decided to kill Aguilar anyway. So this is disturbing in itself and frightening in a number of ways. And we appreciate our viewers for the intention provided in reference to this. So the next piece that we have for you today is in reference to the Young Turks. This is a program which, the Young Turks is a program which provides commentary to subjects in which this group of comment on political activities is initiated by 3 individuals, all of whom are of Turkish background. The level of the criticism is excellent, I feel. In any case, it's worthy of listening to. And this is in reference to the Democratic National Convention.
So biggest fail of the debate is a bit of a tie. Let's see if Wes and Anna can break that tie. So, number one is ABC News. As one of our viewers mentioned here, and as we're covering the debate live, as we do every time, tytnetwork.com/live, Emily Norton tweeted out, and we retweeted and talked about it on there. Oh, this entire debate, not a single question about climate change. Amazing. You know, in the Republican debate, they're talking about national security. Here they were talking about national security. And as Wes pointed out on the live coverage, the Pentagon says it's a national security issue and a very significant one. And in this debate, they also covered domestic policy. Whether it was national security or domestic policy, you couldn't fit a climate change question in at all, as it is not only a very pressing question for the world, but certainly for Democratic voters. And then secondly, as always, not a single question about campaign finance reform. Bernie Sanders mentioned it several times. He said, look, if you're talking about healthcare, one of the problems is that healthcare companies are bribing Congress. You know, same goes for Wall Street and the other people that are creating the problems that we see in America. But he did that unprompted because they're never going to ask about campaign finance reform. They don't ask so far in all the debates, Republican debates, Democratic debates. The biggest beneficiaries of campaign finance and this corrupt system are the TV companies. They get all the TV ads in the political cycle, and they haven't asked one question about the corruption involved in how we finance our elections, the private financing for millionaires, billionaires, and corporate America. Now, so that's pretty bad. That's a pretty bad fail. What's tied with it? The DNC for scheduling a debate on a Saturday night again. I mean, here as we're doing it live, it is almost 11 o'clock at night on Saturday. I mean, these are, yes, hardcore people who care about politics will watch it. You guys have watched it with us. But they want to exclude people who have less knowledge, care less, and might think, I didn't know about Bernie Sanders' position. Now that I found out about it, I might switch over to Bernie Sanders. Right. Look, the DNC is run by a former campaign co-chair of Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It is not an accident. Everyone in politics knows that if you want to bury something, you put it on a Friday or
So it makes sense to mention here that the head of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman, is apparently deeply connected with the Clinton campaign. She is an earlier manager of the Clinton campaign and now controls the decisions as to how the Democratic Party will conduct its campaign. That is scandalous if Sanders is discriminated against in the structure of this campaign debate.
Saturday night. By doing this, they're actively burying it because Hillary Clinton has better name recognition and she wants to coast on that, and then DNC is trying to help her do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So if we're having a discussion about who the biggest loser is, I would say that it's actually the American people. And I'm not saying that because I think they're losers. I'm saying that they're being robbed of the opportunity to hear Bernie Sanders' political points, his agenda, what he plans on doing. They're being robbed of real choices. And that's the issue that I have with the DNC, with the way that these debates are run, with the few debates that have happened so far that give Bernie Sanders and other candidates an opportunity to voice their opinions and their policy ideas. The biggest loser is our democratic process and how it's being completely undermined by all of these dirty political tricks. So I hate the fact that this is on a Saturday night. I hate the fact that people think that Bernie Sanders has done something illegal or wrong because of this nonsense voter data thing that occurred on Friday. It's just fixing, in my opinion, the election in a way that ensures that Hillary Clinton continues to be the front runner. And it's unfair, and again, it undermines the democratic process.
My feelings are not as strong as Anna's on this. I think the real loser was that climate change wasn't addressed, and people aren't treating it as the only real issue compared to everything else, because without the planet, without oxygen, without a functioning environment, we're hosed.
Well, I definitely agree with Wes that we should be pro-oxygen. But Actually, one of the parties might not be. Isn't that amazing? One of the parties, climate change, yeah, the data, I see the data, but I don't believe it. We don't.
So that's amazing, and I think we should look at that for just an instant. The Young Turks have come up on this position, and although they're tongue-in-cheek or sarcastic, the position they're bringing is of eminent importance. And the question is whether or not climate change is going to bury us. Climate change will undoubtedly bury us. And the reason is, and I think we can talk about this now, the reason is the interests in Washington are so jaded that they will not implement political positions necessary to save the planet. They will not do that because they are in a position to profit short term. We're speaking about the next, say, 15 years. The average length of time for an individual in Congress is probably 15 to 17 years. So they want to stay in Congress. They want to continue earning the salary, being part of the elite, making the money, having the prestige, exercising the power, getting the compliments, sucking up to individuals of power, and refuse to make the calls that are necessary to save the planet. One opportunity, one option would be to defund the tax structure giving oil research and development, oil exploration, this incredible tax benefit, this tax rebate that oil corporations get for searching for oil, then excavating it and refining it. The continuation of policies which do not implement the saving of energy by issuing tax benefits for individuals to insulate their homes or offices more completely, to initiate programs in which massive amounts of forestry is replaced, programs in which in Brazil the burning and destruction of the forests is legislated against, and financial incentives are provided to Brazilian farmers to either manage in a different way the land that has been cleared, and to finance their opportunities to earn a living in another manner. These are reasons why the Young Turks are completely justified in their disgust with the lack of seriousness which is played to climate change. The fact that the Republican Party, an entire party, does not take the issue of climate change seriously. It's a scandal, it's scandalous, and the reality is increasingly dangerous. And the reason for the increasing danger is that, as we've stated on our programs, and as Tim Bicycle stated in his recent show here on my Peace Worker radio show on Mondays, as Dr. Tim Bicycle said, the timeline is of incredible importance, because we do not know at which moment the red line has been crossed or will be crossed, meaning that the 2 degrees centigrade has been crossed over, and massive climate change, serious and irreversible climate destruction will be rained down on the earth. Back now to the Young Turks' discussion of the Democratic debate on last Saturday, the 19th of December.
And we don't really need any.
We don't need a bunch of scientists to tell us stuff.
Right. I'm still breathing. I'm still breathing for now. All right, so I'm going to compromise, and I'm going to say that the biggest fail was ABC News for omitting climate change and campaign finance reform, and the biggest loser of the debate was the DNC for showing their bias. I mean, at this point, by burying these debates, suspending Sanders' campaign's access to the voter data, you're exposing your bias and in a fairly brazen way. When you used to, Debbie Wasserman Schultz used to be the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, she should at least recuse herself from these enormously important decisions that wind up helping Hillary Clinton and hurting Bernie Sanders. That is super obvious.
So the DNC is the biggest loser to us because we know what's going on. Do you think the majority of voters have any idea of what's going on? I mean, think about it. The mainstream media played ball. All of their headlines made it seem like Bernie Sanders did something wrong. He absolutely did something wrong. He was stealing data. It made it seem like he hacked into the system to look into Hillary's voter data. That's how the headlines were written. So I don't know if the DNC is the biggest loser because I don't think most people are aware of what's really happening here.
Or we could say the DNC is the biggest winner because the DNC, which is run by the person who used to be Hillary's co-chair on her campaign, was able to get the debate to be on a Saturday night when no one would watch it.
That's right.
So mission accomplished.
So this is a comment by the Young Turks. I feel that their political comment is on target for the most part. I find that their tongue-in-cheek or their irony or their sarcasm is perhaps part of their exuberance. There's nothing to say against that. The reality, however, is, and this is undisputable, that it is an incredible scandal what is going on in these debates. The structure of these debates by Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the person's name who is in charge of the Democratic National Convention of determining at what time, on what dates, and under what conditions these debates are to be held. And it's scandalous because the criteria implemented by Wasserman Schultz is such that they're disadvantageous to Bernie Sanders and a help then to Hillary Clinton. The crisis in America, I feel, is obvious, and it's apparent that the democratic system no longer really works. It's not a system in which candidates have an equal opportunity. It's not fair, and it's ridiculous that sometimes by watching a person of questionable moral position, such as the Republican frontrunner, who was born into a family with a lot of money. Apparently his parents were speculatively active in New York in housing for the poor and indigent, and earned a great deal of money. And he says that he has made a lot of money. He probably hasn't made much money. He's probably using the money that his parents had given him. And when he brags about being incredibly wealthy and he's doesn't have any problems with money, it's probably the Koch brothers' money that is helping him finance, and they're manipulating the Republican campaign. As Debbie Wasserman Schultz is obviously manipulating the Democratic Party's campaign. It's a scandal of epic proportions. And unfortunately, it's taking place here at this time. So let's see what the third topic of today is. Yes. One of the interesting parts about the structure of the economy is, of course, the question of the campaign. Let me get this worked out first of all before I continue to comment on this position. Give me just a minute, please. So the problem that we are having in the United States is a moral problem, an ethical problem, a financial problem, an ecological problem, and the problem that the ruling elites are dastardly. The people of such incredible ignorance, but I mean, why can we call them ignorant? We call them ignorant because, or stupid, or both, because they first of all deny climate change. And climate change is of importance for a number of reasons. It's scientific. There are 93 to 95% of all scientists agree on climate change. It's not a question of debate. It's already been proven that the Earth is warming as a result of human activity. It's not debatable. It's not part of the debate, but it should be part of the democratic debate system because the candidates have different questions or different takes on the solution, at least by the Democratic Party. All three candidates have a different opinion on how to attack global warming, on how to make the nation safer by mitigating the effect of global climate change. But Bernie Sanders has the strongest position on this. He has taken an active position in this. It's been part of his campaign strategy. It's part of the things that Sanders wants to control, to end global warming. And Hillary Clinton doesn't have that strong a position on it. So, as the Young Turks mentioned, because Hillary Clinton doesn't want to talk about it, it's not part of the debate. And because Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's in control of the Democratic National Convention, supports Hillary Clinton, no questions were asked by CBS moderators who developed the questions. And certainly after the questions were developed, they were put forward to Wasserman Schultz and to the candidates themselves. Exact structure of how this went about is not clear, but it should be clear to each of us that these kinds of things happen. And it's a scandal that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as the Three Turks again mentioned and clarified, that she did not refused to make a decision on these things, but left the decision up to someone who was unbiased and could make these calls on behalf of the Democratic Party and not to disadvantage one of the candidates, Bernie Sanders, by making rulings that are in favor of Hillary Clinton's prominence and prominence of her name. And as one individual said, The Hillary Clinton candidates are entrenched. They've been looking for Hillary Clinton to be president of the United States for 30 years. They're so far backlogged in their current thinking that they don't realize that Clinton is not the best candidate. There are times in which Clinton would have been the best candidate. Perhaps in before Bush was elected, before Bush 1 was elected, or before Bush 2 was elected, it would have been excellent for Hillary Clinton to be president. But who wants a dynasty? We already have a dynasty. We had the Kennedy dynasty, then we had the Bush dynasty, and before that we had the Roosevelt dynasty. We don't need dynasties in the United States. We need candidates who are forthright, who are interested in politics, who have a program, who put themselves forward to the American public, who have to debate their way through competition perhaps from other candidates of the same party, but the best candidate should come forward, and then the people should have the forthrightness to elect the best candidate in the political moment and not assassinate them. What happens in the United States is the assassination of candidates. Let's be realistic about this. Even though a political candidate gets elected, perhaps by a majority, they're still not safe. There have already been nearly 10% of American presidents have been assassinated or attempts made on their life, perhaps on 15% or 20% of the American presidents have had assassination attempts on their lives. After the best candidate has already been vetted and then the election takes place, they're still not safe in America because of the number of assassinations which take place. In 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. In 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. In 1968, his brother was assassinated. Malcolm X was assassinated. The Black Panthers in Chicago, the Chicago police dropped a bomb on the house they were living in. They've been killed. The United States is one of the foremost nations on earth for assassinations of presidents or for citizens who the FBI or the CIA feel are dangers and simply assassinate them. This is the way the United States actually works. It's not a question of gun violence generally, it's a question of a climate of violence steeped in violence and crime. So what we now have is a joint economic committee. Janet Yellen, the present head of the economic committee, will be debated here by Bernie Sanders. Janet Yellen is head of the Federal Reserve. Here's the debate.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Yellen, welcome and good luck on your new endeavor here.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to put into the record a recent BBC article entitled, "Study, U.S. is an Oligarchy, Not a Democracy." Mr. Chairman, is that all right? Mr. Chairman, can I place that into the record?
Senator, and without objection.
Thank you. Madam Chair, in the U.S. today, the top 1% own about 38% of the financial wealth of America. The bottom 60% own 2.3%. One family, the Walton family, is worth over $140 billion. That's more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. In recent years, we have seen a huge increase in the number of millionaires and billionaires, while we continue to have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Despite this, as many of my Republican friends talk about the oppressive Obama economic policies, in the last year, Charles and David Koch struggled under these policies, and their wealth increased by $12 billion in 1 year, despite the oppressive Obama economic policies. In terms of income, 95% of new income generated in this country in the last year went to the top 1%. Now, a study which I've just introduced into the record by two professors from Princeton University, Professor Martin Gillens, and Northwestern University Professor Benjamin Page, basically suggest that while historically we have considered our society to be a capitalist democracy, we may now have entered into a phase where we are an oligarchic form of society. In your judgment, given the enormous power held by the billionaire class and their political representatives, are we still a capitalist democracy, or have we gone over into an oligarchic form of society in which incredible economic and political power now rests with the billionaire class?
So all of the statistics on inequality that you've cited are ones that greatly concern me. And I think for the same reason that you're concerned about them, they can shape determine the ability of different groups to participate equally in a democracy, and have grave effects on social stability over time. And so I don't know what to call our system or how to, I prefer not to give labels, but there's no question that we've had a trend toward growing inequality, and I personally find it a very worrisome trend that deserves the attention of policymakers.
Thank you. I mean, I think the point that the professors are making and others have made is that there comes a point where the billionaire class has so much political power, where the Koch brothers are now, because of Citizens United, able to buy and sell politicians. They have so much political power. At what point is that reversible? And that is a great concern to me. I want to go to another point. Some of my colleagues, especially in the House, believe that we can improve lives for the middle class and create jobs by completely repealing the estate tax, which applies now to perhaps less than 0.1% of the wealthiest families in this country. Would it make sense to you to give enormous tax breaks to the families of the top 1% of people in this country?
So I've indicated that I share your concern with inequality, but I guess I'm going to say on this that it's up to the Congress to decide what's appropriate, and there are a number of different ways to address it that certainly is on the list.
All right. Well, let me ask you another question. Some of my friends in the House, in the Ryan budget and so forth, suggest that one way to stimulate the economy to create decent-paying jobs is to give more tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations, despite the massive wealth and income inequality we have right now. If we give tax breaks to the Koch brothers, who are worth $80 billion, do you think that's going to create a whole lot of jobs in this country?
Well, I'd say most of the evidence that we have suggests that transfers to lower income people tend to be spent, a larger fraction of the dollar is spent than when there's a transfer to a wealthy individual, but changes in tax policy, so that's from the demand side. Tax policy also has supply side effects that one should take into account.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
So that was Janet Yellen, who's chair of the Federal Reserve. The questions presented by Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders were presented in such a way apparently so that Sanders was interested in having Janet Yellen give a comment to the Federal Record in reference to this this massive inequality, because it's of great importance what the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve had, up until a week ago, not changed the interest policy for 8 years. The interest rate of the Federal Reserve was about 0%, the lowest interest rate that it's possible to maintain, and that over a period of 8 years. The reason was to stimulate the economy. The reason was to give industry the opportunity to borrow large amounts of money, industry, banks, billionaires, to borrow large amounts of money at 0 rates of interest, and to use this money to for their own discretion. Individuals who were able to secure a mortgage did not secure the mortgage at 0%. I can't imagine that. I would imagine they might be able to secure it for 3.5 or 4% or perhaps 4.5. Likewise, individuals financing college debt were not able to finance their college debt for 0%. I'm sure that the interest rates were similar to that of mortgage rates or higher. The realities of interest rates are detrimental, of course, to individuals who lived on fixed income, on seniors who have to pay their mortgages and their bills on money that they have received as pensions, veterans as well, and those who live on a fixed income of any kind, find it very difficult when cost of living increases are not made, or in borrowing money to refinance something is optimal if that could be done at 0%. But as we've seen in student debts, and as we've seen in the financing of mortgages, that banks do not provide the same amount of mortgage rate as they have access to. They borrow at 0% because that's what they are able to do. But in providing an individual homeowner, the rate is higher, and the difference is what the bank makes as a profit. And banks who speculate and lose money are then bailed out by the Congress, by the federal government, as is seen in the subprime mortgage meltdown. Let's continue with this matter here on our screen.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Yellen, welcome and good luck on your new endeavor here.
I believe this is a repeat of the program.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to put into the record a recent BBC article entitled, "Study, U.S. is an Oligarchy, Not a Democracy." Mr. Chairman, is that all right? Mr. Chairman, can I place that into the record?
Senator, and without objection.
Thank you. Madam Chair, in the U.S. today, the top 1% own about 38% of the financial wealth of America. The bottom 60% own 2.3%. One family, the Walton family, is worth over $140 billion. That's more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. In recent years, we have seen a huge increase in the number of millionaires and billionaires, while we continue to have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Despite this, as many of my Republican friends talk about the oppressive Obama economic policies. In the last year, Charles and David Koch struggled under these policies, and their wealth increased by $12 billion in 1 year, despite the oppressive Obama economic policies. In terms of income, 95% of new income generated in this country in the last year went to the top 1%. Now, a study which I've just introduced into the record by two professors from Princeton University, Professor Martin Gillens, and Northwestern University Professor Benjamin Page, basically suggests that while historically we have considered our society to be a capitalist democracy, we may now have entered into a phase where we are an oligarchic form of society. In your judgment, given the enormous power held by the billionaire class and their political representatives, are we still a capitalist democracy, or have we gone over into an oligarchic form of society in which incredible economic and political power now rests with the billionaire class?
So all of the statistics on inequality that you've cited are ones that greatly concern me. And I think for the same reason that you're concerned about them, they can shape determine the ability of different groups to participate equally in a democracy and have grave effects on social stability over time. And so I don't know what to call our system or how to, I prefer not to give labels, but there's no question that we've had a trend toward growing inequality, and I personally find it a very worrisome trend that deserves the attention of policymakers.
Thank you. I mean, I think the point that the professors are making and others have made is that there comes a point where the billionaire class has so much political power, where the Koch brothers are now, because of Citizens United, able to buy and sell politicians. They have so much political power. At what point is that reversible? And that is a great concern to me. I want to go to another point. Some of my colleagues, especially in the House, believe that we can improve lives for the middle class and create jobs by completely repealing the estate tax, which applies now to perhaps less than 1/10 of 1% of the wealthiest families in this country. Would it make sense to you to give enormous tax breaks to the families of the top 1% of people in this country?
So I've indicated that I share your concern with inequality, but I guess I'm going to say on this that it's up to the Congress to decide what's appropriate, and there are a number of different ways to address it that certainly is on the list.
All right. Well, let me ask you another question. Some of my friends in the House, and the Ryan budget and so forth, suggest that one way to stimulate the economy to create decent-paying jobs is to give more tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations, despite the massive wealth and income inequality we have right now. If we give tax breaks to the Koch brothers, who are worth $80 billion, do you think that's going to create a whole lot of jobs in this country?
Well, I'd say most of the evidence that we have suggests that transfers to lower income people tend to be spent, a larger fraction of a dollar is spent than when there's a transfer to a wealthy individual, but changes in tax policy, so that's from the demand side. Tax policy also has supply side effects that one should take into account.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
that was the discussion with Janet Yellen, chairman of the Federal Reserve, in which Bernie Sanders was interested apparently in having Janet Yellen make a decision or an opinion as to the tax policies that she is responsible for, the interest rates in the Federal Reserve, or the tax policies that the interest rates that she has would influence the climate, the political climate, to award tax breaks through the Republican Party to millionaires and billionaires such as the Koch brothers by allowing them to conduct business in a manner in which they increase greatly their billions of dollars. The Harvard University right down the street is a institution with an endowment of about 36, perhaps it's $40 billion now. Obscene, having that much of an endowment, and the interest rate on that endowment in banks or in speculative shares on Wall Street. So we'll take an opportunity now, perhaps, to find a program in reference to something equally interesting to our viewers. We believe that in reference to the Sanders question, it's of incredible importance that one gives some air, some time to Bernie Sanders. The interesting thing about Sanders is that he's a candidate of great oratory ability and has the interests of the American people. It's my opinion in this that Sanders has the interests of the American people at heart. And I believe that's apparent for a number of reasons. One of them being the fact of his discussing these matters truthfully. I believe that what Sanders basically does is he speaks truth to power. That's my feeling with Bernie Sanders. And perhaps it will be a feeling that the viewer, you perhaps, can get from watching this address. It's several minutes long, but the interest is considerable on this because Sanders speaks to the real questions of that interest the American people, questions of government and the necessity to govern in a way that benefits the majority and not the minority. So without further ado, this is the address that Bernie Sanders has given. I believe it was in, if I'm not mistaken, in Vermont. So without further ado, thanks for listening.
Mr. President. Senator from Vermont is recognized.
Mr. President, there is a war going on in this country, and I'm not referring to the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. I'm talking about a war being waged by some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country against the working families of the United States of America, against the disappearing and shrinking middle class of our country. The reality is that many of the nation's billionaires are on the warpath. They want more, more, more. Their greed has no end, and apparently there is very little concern for our country or for the people of this country if it gets in the way of the accumulation of more and more wealth and more power. Mr. President, in the year 2007, the top 1% of all income earners in the United States made 23.5% of all income. Top 1% earned 23.5% of all income, more than the entire bottom 50%. That's apparently not enough. The percentage of income going to the top 1% nearly tripled since the 1970s. In the mid-1970s, the top 1% earned about 8% of all income. In the 1980s, that figure jumped to 14%. In the late 1990s, that 1% earned about 19%. And today, as the middle class collapses, top 1% earns 23.5% of all income, more than the bottom 50%. Today, if you can believe it, the top 1/10 of 1% earns about 12 cents of every dollar earned in America. So we talk about a lot of things on the floor of the Senate, but somehow we forget to talk about the reality of who is winning in this economy and who is losing. And it is very clear to anyone who spends 2 minutes studying the issue that the people on top are doing extraordinarily well at the same time as the middle class is collapsing and poverty is increasing. Mr. President, if you can believe this, many people out there are angry. They're wondering what's happening to their own income, to their lives, to the lives of their kids. Since between 1980 and 2005, 80% of all new income created in this country went to the top 1%. 80% of all new income. And that's why people are wondering and asking, what's going on in my life? How come I'm working longer hours for lower wages? How come I'm worrying about whether my kids will have as good a standard of living as I've had? From 1980 to 2005, 80% of all income went to the top 1%. Today, the Wall Street executives, the crooks on Wall Street, whose actions resulted in the severe recession that we are in right now, the people whose actions, illegal actions, reckless actions, have resulted in millions of Americans losing their jobs, their homes, their savings. Guess what? After we bail them out, the CEOs today are now earning more money than they did before the bailout. Mr. President, while the middle class in this country collapses and the rich become much richer, the United States now has by far the most unequal distribution of income and wealth of any major country on earth. When we were in school, we used to read the textbooks which talked about the banana republics in Latin America. We used to read the books about countries in which a handful of people owned and controlled most of the wealth of those countries. Well, guess what? That's exactly what is happening in the United States today. Mr. President, the wealthiest people in this country, not all of them, by the way, not all of them. There are many wealthy people in this country who understand and are proud to be Americans, who understand that one of the things that's important is that all of us do well. But there are, on the other hand, many others whose apparently only concern is more and more wealth and more power for themselves. And this is an issue, this greed is an issue that we have got to deal with. Now, in the midst of all of this, growing income and wealth inequality in this country, we are now faced with the issue of what we do with the Bush tax cuts of 2001 and 2003. And if you can believe it, we have people here, many of my Republican colleagues, who tell us, oh, I am so concerned about our record-breaking deficit. I am terribly concerned about a $13.7 trillion national debt, terribly concerned about the debt that we're going to be leaving to our kids and our grandchildren. But wait a minute, it's very important that we give over a 10-year period $700 billion in tax breaks to the top 2%. Oh, yeah, we're concerned about the debt, we're concerned about the deficit, but we are more concerned that millionaires, people who earn at least $1 million a year or more, get on average $100,000 a year in tax breaks. So you got a $13.7 trillion national debt growing. You've got growing income inequality, top 1% earning more income than the bottom 50%. But the highest priority of many of my Republican colleagues is to make sure that millionaires and billionaires get more tax breaks. I think that that is absurd. But it is not only income tax rates that we're dealing with. It is the estate tax as well. And let's be clear, while some of my friends want to eliminate completely the estate tax, which has been in existence in this country since 1916, let us be clear that every nickel of benefit, all of those benefits, will go to the top 0.3%. And if we did, as some of my friends would like, eliminate the estate tax completely, it would cost us $1 trillion in revenue over a 10-year period, all of the benefits going to the top 0.3%. So I am sure that in a little while my friends are going to come down to the floor and say, we're very concerned about the deficit, we're very concerned about the national debt, but you know what we're more concerned about? Giving huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. But, Mr. President, the tax issue is just one part of what some of our wealthy friends want to see happen in this country. The reality is that many of these folks want to bring
This is where Sanders gets political. I don't give a crap what some people say to me on the streets about my being partial to Democrats who are proposing policies that cannot be sustained and that will ruin America. That doesn't bother me at all. Or being bluffed or being spat on that doesn't really make much of a difference. What is important about Bernie Sanders and what he has to say is what he's going to say here about the Republican Party, because the scandalous element of the Republican Party is their incredible ignorance and partiality to a system of finance which really does discriminate massively against the poor and the working poor, and to the advantage of the elites and the wealthy. And not only that, the scandal again is in reference to the Supreme Court justices who decided in a 5-4 vote in Citizens United that the massive finance and the tax breaks going to the wealthy can be used to buy politicians. This is what Sanders has to say about this scandal.
The United States back to where we were in the 1920s. And they want to do their best to eliminate all traces of social legislation which working families fought tooth and nail to develop to bring a modicum of stability and security to their lives. There are people out there, not all, but there are some who want to privatize or completely eliminate Social Security. They want to privatize or cut back substantially on Medicare. Yeah, if you're 75 years of age and you have no money, good luck to you getting your health insurance at an affordable cost from a private insurance company. I am just sure there are all kinds of private insurance companies out there just delighted to take care of low-income seniors who are struggling with cancer or another disease. Mr. President, furthermore, there are corporate leaders out there and many members of Congress who not only want to continue, they want to expand our disastrous trade policies. My wife and I went shopping the other day, started our Christmas shopping. And we looked, and virtually every product that was out there in the store consumer products was China, China, and China. We seem to be a country in which we have a 51st state named China, which is producing virtually all of the products that we as Americans consume. Our trade policy has resulted in the loss of millions of good-paying jobs as large corporations and CEOs have said, why do I want to reinvest in America when I can go to countries where people are paid 50 cents, 75 cents an hour? That's what I'm going to do, to heck with the working people of this country. So not only are we saddled with this disastrous trade policy, there are people who actually want to expand it. Now, one of the things that we're going to see going on is that while we struggle with a record-breaking deficit and a large national debt caused by the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, caused by tax breaks for the wealthy, caused by an unpaid-for Medicare Part D prescription drug program, caused by the Wall Street bailout, driving up the deficit, driving up the national debt. Then some people can say, oh, my goodness, we got all of those expenses, and then we got to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, but we want to balance the budget. Gee, how are we going to do that? Well, obviously, we know how they're going to do that. We're going to cut back on health care. We're going to cut back on education. We're going to cut back on child care. We're going to cut back on Pell programs. We just don't have enough money for working families and their needs. We're going to cut back on food stamps. We're surely not going to expand unemployment compensation. We got a higher priority, Mr. President. We have got to give tax breaks to billionaires. I mean, that's what this whole place is about, isn't it? They fund the campaigns. They get what's due them. Mr. President, amazingly enough, we have our friends on Wall Street, the CEOs of the large financial institutions. They want to rescind or slow down many of the provisions, the very modest provisions in the financial reform bill. I voted for the financial reform bill, but I will tell you clearly it did not go anywhere near far enough, but it went too far for our Wall Street friends and their lobbyists who are all over here. And for the hundreds of millions of dollars Wall Street spends on this place, they want to rescind, slow down some of the reforms there. These people want to cut back on the powers of the EPA and the Department of Energy so that ExxonMobil can remain the most profitable corporation in world history, while oil and coal companies continue to pollute our air and our water. Last year, ExxonMobil made $19 billion in profit. Guess what? They paid zero in taxes. They got a $156 million refund from the IRS. I guess that's not good enough. We've got to give the oil companies even more tax breaks. So, Mr. President, I think that's where we are. We've got to own up to it. There is a war going on. The middle class is struggling for existence, and they're taking on some of the wealthiest and most powerful forces in the world, whose greed has no end. And if we don't begin to stand together and start representing those families, there will not be a middle class in this country. Mr. President, with that, I would yield the floor.
That is a powerful, powerful speech by someone willing to speak truth to power. Bernie Sanders, candidate of the Democratic Party of the United States for President of the United States. That is an individual capable of speaking truth to power. And it's important that we enter here a summary of that speech by Bernie Sanders. He's on the floor of the Vermont legislature and speaking clearly truth to power. It's important that we recognize the significance of this speech because he names all of the elements that are relevant to us today. The fact that the Republicans bitch about the wealthy are not getting their fair share. They are getting tax breaks upon tax breaks. The budget that was just released and agreed upon just a week ago, the $1 trillion budget, $1 trillion, which will fund the government for 1 year until, not even for 1 year, I believe up until September, for only 9 months, $1 trillion will fund the United States necessities, payments. But at the same time, there were $800 billion of tax breaks over a 10-year period, which the Republicans financed as well. This burden goes to all Americans and not to the wealthy who have attorneys that can provide for them tax breaks. It's not the corporations, as Sanders mentioned, because the wealthiest corporations in America and the best earning corporations in America, he mentioned, I believe, Standard Oil, or as it's now called, Esso, or as it's now called, another name for the oil company, which earned $19 billion in the last fiscal year, paid 0 taxes last year. So the question is, when these budgets are agreed to by the parties and the tax breaks are given to the millionaires and billionaires, the reality is, and this is important to recognize, the reality is that the poor and the working poor are going to carry the major efforts to repay these bills, this deficit. The poor and working poor are paying for these tax deficits, these tax breaks, are paying to finance the $500 billion plus that goes into defense, Pentagon spending, which was obvious that it wasn't good enough for the Pentagon to protect themselves against an attack of an airline on 9/11/2001, because a plane ran directly into the Pentagon. Where were the fighter jets that were supposed to have prevented these attacks? Where was the air traffic controllers? Where were the air defense capabilities all along the eastern coast, all over New York, all over the state of Maryland, of Pennsylvania, of Florida, Pensacola? Where were all of these air traffic controllers? And the defense budget spending $585 billion in the last budget. Where was this going for defense? Where is this going as far as the defense of the United States against terrorist attacks? We're spending this incredible amount of money. Where are the police in these attacks? Where is the CIA? Where is the FBI? Where are they basically investing their time and energy? The fear of the United States public is massive, but the fear is greater in reference to them not being able to pay their bills, not being able to pay for college for their children, not being able to maintain the same standard of living as their parents had. The fear in America is massive and growing, but it's not in reference to their being killed by terrorists. It's in reference to their not being able to provide for their families. There are already 40 million Americans living in poverty. There are already millions and tens of millions of Americans who do not know where they're going to get their next meal, living in cars, living on the streets. Thousands and tens of thousands of veterans are living in shelters. The reality is that it's a disgrace. This nation is a disgrace to those who are poor and working poor. And it's a disgrace how the Republican Party continues to give tax breaks and massive tax supports to the billionaires of this nation. It's a disgrace. It's not only my opinion, it's the opinion of Janet Yellen and others. They don't say it, but they feel it. Let's see if we can find, in the last few minutes, I believe this is a speech by Bernie Sanders about what happened to the American dream. It's a good speech, and we hope that you will take time to watch it. Thanks for joining Peace Worker Radio here, coming to you from Cambridge Community Television. Cambridge Community Television. Here's a speech from Bernie Sanders. Thanks for joining us.
Madam President, I hear more and more from people in my own state of Vermont and for people, in fact, all over this country via email, through my website, who are wondering whether or not this great country is evolving into an oligarchic society. Historically, as I think most people know, the United States was the envy of the world for so many reasons. But one of the reasons economically is that in our country, there was always the belief that regardless of your income, you had the opportunity to move up the economic ladder. There was the reality, not just the belief, but the reality, that we had a great and expanding middle class, that if your dad and your mom didn't go to college, which was in fact the case in my family, you would have that opportunity to go to college and move up the educational ladder or the business ladder or professional field. And there was this feeling that economically what America was about and what we celebrated was the great middle class. And I think people today, both from an economic perspective and from a political perspective, are beginning in a very serious way to question that reality. And what they are looking at is that today in our country, we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. And, you know, I think a lot of young people say, well, how could that be? In England, you have the Queen of England, you have all the lords and all the royalty and all over Europe. And we don't have that in the United States. Yet, the truth is that over the years, we have moved to a situation where in terms of wealth and income, we are now the most unequal society of any major industrialized nation on earth. And I keep mentioning one statistic because I don't hear too many other people talking about it, but we need to talk about it. And that is in terms of wealth. Wealth is what we own. Wealth is what we have accumulated over a lifetime of work. In terms of wealth, the top 1% in our nation owns 38% of the financial wealth of America. And I would ask those people back home who might be listening, what does the bottom 60% own? Top 1% owns 38% of the wealth. What do you think the bottom 60% own? They own 25%, 20%, 10%. What do they own? Well, the answer is they own all of 2.3%. All of 2.3% is what the bottom 60% of Americans own in terms of total wealth. So if you had a big pizza with 100 slices in it, one person would get 38% of those pieces of pizza if we looked at wealth, and the bottom 60% of the people would have to share 2.3% of the pizza. I don't think that that is what America is supposed to be about, and that situation is getting even worse. In terms of income right now, all right, everybody goes out and works, and you got millions of people today who are working longer hours, and their income is going down. Their wages are going down. Maybe they're paying more for health care. Their pensions are going down. But in terms of all new income generated in this country, from the last statistics we saw, which were 2009 to 2012, in terms of all new income, 95% of all new income went to the top 1%. So more and more income goes to the millionaires and billionaires, while millions of people are working longer hours for lower wages, while we have the highest rate of childhood poverty at 22% of any major country on earth. Since 1999, the typical middle-class family has seen its income go down by more than $5,000. You want to know why people are angry, why people are concerned, why people are worried what is going to happen to their kids? Is because the median family income has gone down by $5,000 since 1999. Let me break it down even further. The typical male worker, that guy right in the middle, makes $283 less last year than he did 44 years ago. Imagine that. In the last 44 years, with all of the increase in productivity, with all of the robotics, with all of the space technology, all of the iPhones and iPads and everything else, where people are now producing much more, the typical male worker made $283 less last year than he did 44 years ago. The typical female worker earned $1,700 less last year than she did in 2007. Today in America, we have more people living in poverty than ever before, and that's 46.5 million people. And Madam President, here is a fact that should frighten everybody, and that is half of Americans have less than $10,000 in their savings account right now. Can you imagine that? That means that if your car breaks down and you need that car to get to work, or you have a serious health problem and you don't have particularly good health insurance, there it goes. It goes. And then you talk about people who are getting older who have to retire. How do you retire with dignity if you have less than $10,000 in the bank? Well, you're going to get Social Security, and thank God you and I and other members here have fought hard to make sure that there were not cuts in Social Security that many people wanted. But is Social Security alone enough? The answer is no, it is not. What is happening in this country is that while the middle class shrinks, there is another reality, and that is the people on top are doing phenomenally well. They are doing phenomenally well. Today, we see a situation in which some of the wealthiest families in America, Koch brothers come to mind, I'll talk about them in another context, they are now worth $80 billion. In the last year alone, their wealth went from $68 billion to $80 billion in 1 year. 1 year, a $12 billion increase in their wealth. Sheldon Adelson, a man, another billionaire who's got his name in the paper a whole lot recently by bringing prospective Republican candidates for the presidency to Las Vegas to talk to them and see what they have to offer him and how much money he will contribute to their campaign. He also saw a huge increase in his wealth over the last year. So what oligarchy looks like, what is the face of oligarchy? The face of oligarchy is what we see in Russia. And many people think about oligarchy, think of Russia. In Russia, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a small number of bureaucrats were able to steal a lot of public property, and they became multi-billionaires. They controlled oil companies, banks, gold mines, aluminum companies, television stations, and other state-owned companies, and that's how they became oligarchs. By 2001, 5 oligarchs controlled 95% of Russia's aluminum production, 40% of its copper, on it goes. And people say, well, oligarchy, that has to do with Russia. What does it have to do with the United States of America? Well, it has everything to do with the United States of America because that is the direction in which we are moving. Now, let me give you some example of what oligarchs do. When we think of oligarchy, we might want to think of a gentleman named Hank McKinnell Jr., who was the CEO of Pfizer, the major drug company, from 2001 to 2006. And when he retired, he received a $188 million golden parachute. $188 million at the same time as the people in our country pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's oligarchy. When we think about oligarchy, we may want to think about a gentleman named Lee Raymond, who served as the CEO of ExxonMobil from 1993 to 2005. When he retired, and remember, this is at a time when the vast majority of the American people do not have the resources to retire with a shred of dignity. But when Mr. Raymond retired from ExxonMobil, he received a golden parachute, retirement benefits, of more than $320 million. $320 million. And that's at the same time when people in Vermont and all over this country are finding it harder and harder to pay for gas at the pump. And what oligarchy is also about is that in 2009, ExxonMobil, maybe the most profitable corporation in the history of America, did not pay any federal income taxes, even though in that year it earned $19 billion in profits. Madam President, when we talk about oligarchy, we might want to think about somebody like Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. And he recently received a 74% increase in pay, more than $20 million in total compensation. Now, interestingly enough, that's a pretty big salary, $20 million. What did he do to earn it? Well, during that same period, over the last year, the bank he runs, J.P. Morgan Chase, paid out over $20 billion in penalties to the federal government for financial fraud. So your reward after paying out $20 billion to the federal government in penalties for financial fraud is to get a $20 million compensation package. That's called oligarchy. No matter what you do, if you're at the head of a large financial institution, you're going to get rewarded for that. Oligarchy has a lot to do with a gentleman named William McGuire, the CEO of United Health Group from 1991 to 2006. And everybody knows the crisis that we're facing in healthcare. Everybody knows that tens of millions of Americans today, despite the Affordable Care Act, are still uninsured. And everybody knows that we spend more per capita on healthcare than do the people of any other nation. And yet when this gentleman retired from United Health Group in 2006, he received a $285 million golden parachute. So we have the most dysfunctional healthcare system in the world, the most expensive healthcare system, Tens of millions of people uninsured, yet the head of a major insurance company gets $285 million in retirement benefits.
That is Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Democratic candidate to be President of the United States, speaking truth to power. What's important, again, in Sanders' address is that he speaks the truth, he speaks it publicly, and he speaks it so that you can look at it yourself on YouTube. Just type in the search words Bernie Sanders on YouTube or YouTube Bernie Sanders, and you'll get one speech after another. And I think it's rewarding to listen to Sanders because he is telling the truth about the structure, financial structure, political structure of the United States at a time in which the finances are not even the most dangerous part of our existence. More dangerous than the financial end of it is certainly global climate change. Certainly. That is something that is going to potentially bury us, because no one wants a revolution in the United States. No one wants to have a revolutionary change in the